We will be discussing the recent findings of the Kroger and PBFA plant-based meat case study with 4 panelists. We have Julie Emmett, the Senior Director of Retail Partnerships from PBFA. Julie develops opportunities for PBFA member companies and retailers to help grow plant-based food sales through strategic merchandising initiatives, education, data analysis, research, and marketing. We also have Marcellus Harris, who is the Assistant Commodity Manager of Poultry for Kroger. His current role is to grow sales with fresh poultry while driving innovation by working closely with 8451, analyzing sales trends and partnering with suppliers. We also have Jessica Mahan, who is a lead business development consultant at 8451. Jessica connects association boards, product licensors, marketing and media agencies with leading customer data and insights. And we also have Eric Wolf, who is a director of retail merchandising and strategy for 8451. In his current role, he helps clients identify areas and processes where insight can be infused to make better business decisions. So I'll let Julie and the team take it from here.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you all for attending. So sharing plant-based trends and specifically the results of the plant-based meat research with you all is incredibly exciting, and we truly value our partnership with you. Before we share the plant-based meat study, we'll briefly take a look at the size and growth and the implications of plant-based foods as a whole. And it is particularly important as it is this data that led us to explore the possibility of a control store research project for plant-based meat. So we'll begin with who is the plant-based shopper, plant-based food shopper. This shows a continuum from the omnivore to the vegan, with flexitarians being the primary shopper target. So vegans and vegetarians combined represent 6% of the population. As shoppers continue to focus on their health as well as the environment, there has been a significant shift towards those who identify as flexitarians. So flexitarians are those who are reducing their consumption of meat and dairy or choose to eat it only occasionally, and they account for 1/3 of the population minimally. The remaining 65% omnivores eat a wide variety of foods, including plant-based. So both the shopper and the category are now considered mainstream. They're no longer a niche category. And as Marcellus and Jess will elaborate on shortly, they kept the flexitarian in mind for this research, and including those who are just starting their plant-based journey, as well as those who are more engaged. So looking at the shopper more closely, both millennials and Gen Z are driving growth of plant-based foods. So these combined generations not only care about their health, but they also care about the environment and animal welfare. 79% of Gen Z already eat plant-based meat 1 to 2 times per week. And when asked, they said that they would definitely consider committing to a plant-based diet, which is really pretty amazing. The oldest age of Gen Z generation is 23. And so often I hear parents that became vegan because of their teenage kids, me being one of them. And so while they may not have direct buying power, they certainly have influence on those who do. So what we're looking at here is the size and growth over time of plant-based foods. So the data we're presenting and looking at today, it's custom data and represents a comprehensive account of grocery retail sales of plant-based foods which replace animal products. And this includes plant-based meat, milk, all other dairy, eggs, meals, condiments, and tofu and tempeh. And this is 52 weeks ending December 29th, 2019. We do obtain our data from SPINS, our data partner, and includes multi-outlet, including as well as their proprietary channels for natural and specialty. But PBFA does code this data along with GFI based on the certified plant-based certification definition that Jen was referring to earlier. So it is custom data. So if you see to the left that there's been tremendous growth over the past 3 years. It's grown 29% since 2017. And when we look on the right, that's just in the past year, plant-based foods as a whole grew 11.4% compared to total food, which grew 2.2%, more than 5 times faster than total food. So this is a breakout of each of the plant-based foods categories and their share of their respective category as a whole. So you can see here that plant-based milk has a 14% share of total fluid milk. And on the other hand, plant-based meat has a 2% share of all packaged meat, When you include random weight, it's actually 1%. And the remaining categories also have a smaller share of their respective animal-based categories. And so the point here really is that as plant-based categories reach their potential share, this represents billions of dollars of growth for plant-based foods. So how do we reach that potential is through optimal merchandising, which we'll be talking about shortly. So again, by category, plant-based meat is leading the absolute dollar volume by a significant margin. You can see here, plant-based meat contributed $146 million of absolute dollar volume growth last year. So moving into 2020 data, in light of the pandemic, we wanted to better understand the relevance of plant-based foods, and we learned it is now more relevant than ever. So in May, PBFA published the total US weekly trend for plant-based foods from January to the latest data available at that time, which was through April 19th of 2020. So we compared it to total food and total category sales. So total plant-based foods began the year more than 50% stronger than it ended in 2019. So that, before we even got into this environment that we're in now. So when panic buying hit in mid-March, plant-based foods peaked at 90%, strongly outpacing total food sales, which is not surprising considering the relative size of each. However, most importantly, plant-based foods grew 27% post-panic buying and continues to grow stronger than total food, really demonstrating that consumers are turning to plant-based foods during this time. And additionally, plant-based meat spiked at 148% during panic buying, much stronger, 50% stronger than animal-based meat. And again, and really importantly, post-panic buying, plant-based meat grew 34%, almost 2 times that of animal-based meat. So what we see, this is a study of 1,000 shopper interviews during the last week of May. And so we see here, not surprisingly, which is wonderful seeing this cooking demo to help us all, as we cook more at home. So 73% report eating more home-cooked meals, 65% are reporting that they're eating healthier overall, and 34% are reporting that they're eating more plant-based foods. Then the Kroger specific data is even more compelling. So in a Kroger statement for the press release announcing the results of the research that we're about to talk about, I'm just going to read it. So from March to June 2020, Kroger increased its plant-based meat customer count by more than 50% compared to last year at this time. And in addition to customer increases, shoppers are also purchasing more often and in greater quantities than before, which has led to a sales growth of greater than 75% during this time. And so at this level of growth, the question became, what merchandising strategy is best and how can we prove it? PBFA's goal 18 months ago when we were setting out to find a research partner to be able to inform the industry with evidence-based research about how to best merchandise plant-based meat in the midst of conflicting opinions on behalf of both retailers and brands. So given the massive dollar opportunity, we knew this was really important research. So PBFA is so grateful to have found an incredible partner in Kroger, the #1 US grocery retailer, leading edge analytic partner in 8451, and the willingness to share the results, not only with the industry, but with the world. Not only did Forbes and Fox Business and Bloomberg pick up the press release, but we just learned that a press release was translated into Chinese for an article there. So as we get into the headline here, as we know, optimal merchandising is usually an interesting question. And in fact, this is a question that PBFA is asked the most. How do you recommend that we merchandise plant-based meat? So I will now turn it over to Marcellus Harris, who led this research for Kroger.
Thank you, Julie. I appreciate that. So the real sort of crux of why this started is that on the merchandising side, at least, we had noticed that there was a shift just in public consciousness, especially on the heels of the Beyond Meat branded burgers and sausage success. And then on top of that, you had Impossible Burgers, which were experiencing success and customer demand really on the restaurant side of things. And it wasn't just the grocers that recognized this shift. Like suppliers were taking notice, and they started presenting us with their answers to Beyond Burger and driving some standalone and, in a lot of cases, differentiating innovation on their own to try to make them stand out and separate themselves. So on our end, we were already poised to make some changes to our own sets that were more inclusive of plant-based items. So the timing of our meeting with the PBFA and the proposition of the test was really perfect. And organization with the level of expertise and connection with the plant-based foods industry really made the partnership a no-brainer. And so once we allied our two organizations, the questions we wanted to tackle started to come in a really organic and rapid-fire pace. So like, what happens if we offer a plant-based solution for every meal in one set? Like, would that elevate the sales of plant-based meat overall? And did it impact sales to total meat? And does it draw in new customers and or bring new customers to the category? So those were our really top line questions that we had after we pared them down because they were coming at us from all sides. So the other part of the why was how do we establish, I guess not so much really establish, but how do we make it more well known that we as Kroger are leaders in the plant-based space, right? And to do that is to display some of the myriad of options that we have in a beautiful, thought-out set that draws attention and can serve as a beacon for customers, not only seeking that product, but those that are just curious as well. So on our side, we partnered with our friends in grocery to dual place some of their items to expand the offerings in the sets that we were going to create. And so this gave us a really unique vantage and opportunity to see how consumers interact with plant-based meat items in different strategies. Is it better to have it in the refrigerated grocery set, or is it better to have it in the meat department, or does it matter at all? Like, what does it really do to a customer's perception of how Kroger interacts with plant-based foods if we change that up? And so that was a really important part of what we were trying to figure out. The test itself was actually conducted in 60 stores in two divisions, Central and King Soopers, and it lasted for 12 weeks. It was supposed to be longer, but as some of you may know, COVID-19 pandemic did present a slightly disruptive force. And thankfully, the brilliant minds of our 8451 team added some buffer time to allow for unexpected issues. In addition to the 60 test stores, we also had control stores for comparison so that their meat sets just evolved as they would have naturally, as I mentioned a little bit ago. You know, we had suppliers coming to us with plant-based options of their own. And so what we were going to add in just happened and flowed naturally in the control test stores, whereas we expanded and made a much larger and more present 3-foot set in our test stores to provide us the comparison. Further components of the test included shopper interviews, which I attended in the Central Division and Julie Emmett attended in King Soopers. We created shopper communication to let customers know about the test and education documents for the meat teams in our test stores. Because we really wanted them to be able to speak to the product that they were selling in terms of usage, cooking, and to be able to have the same level of interaction with the customer that any customer would expect when they have a question at our meat department. Additionally, we did include some audits in the test stores to ensure that we had full compliance at store level, which by and large went over really well. And I would be remiss if I didn't offer a huge shout out and thanks to the Central and King Soopers teams. They were immediately on board with participation when we proposed the idea, and we really could not have done this without their assistance. And part of the reason why we chose Central and King Soopers is because they represented different levels of plant-based understanding and utilization, whereas Central was a little newer to plant-based foods and King Soopers was a little further on the journey. So it was an interesting way to compare and contrast interactions of customers who were newer to the plant-based space versus those who were already familiar and integrated plant-based foods into their day-to-day. So with that, I will hand it on.
Awesome. Thank you, Marcellus. Yes. So ultimately, what we set out to understand is, did sales of plant-based meat increase? You know, how is existing plant-based meat in the meat department impacted? Did Kroger capture new customers? And did Kroger maintain existing customers? So the results, the exciting stuff. Overall, we saw that packaged plant-based meat sales increased by 23% across both King Soopers and Central. We also saw a 5% sales uplift for fresh plant-based meat, which includes a larger base, showing statistically significant uplift in the test versus control scores. So in the Midwest region, where more flexitarians are emerging, packaged plant-based meat sales increased 32% in the test versus control. And in the Denver area, which already has a high concentration of plant-based meat consumers, the test also showed impressive results, with packaged plant-based meat sales up 13%. So really, this proved out our hypothesis that there may be a bit more headroom or opportunity in Central or like divisions, where there's a little bit of a less developed market as it relates to plant-based than out West. This really mirrors an assumption we hear a lot about the true emerging flexitarian versus those maybe in Colorado who are already engaged and are seeking plant-based meat already wherever it is in the store. We also measured impact to the natural foods refrigerated vegetarian set and the total animal-based meat department as well. So this test did not significantly impact positively or negatively plant-based meat or beef, pork, or poultry. So diving into the KPIs that were driving, that ultimate sales uplift, of course, sales, households, household penetration, and visits were up in both markets versus the control. What was great to see was that the growth was really coming from new households engaging with the set, as opposed to current customers making more trips, trading up, or buying more items per trip. So this could include, of course, new households to Kroger, but most likely these are households new to plant-based in general. All right. And then, as Marcellus mentioned, we also conducted shopper interviews. So we wanted to make sure we actually heard from our customers. So we interviewed 16 shoppers across both markets who are along different stages of their plant-based journey. So we talked to heavy plant-based meat buyers, we talked to medium and light plant-based meat buyers, and opportunity households. So those who are not currently buying plant-based meat, but are interested in doing so. The goal was to understand shopper reaction to placement and in-store signage as well. What we heard was that shoppers with multiple diet preferences in the household liked that they could easily grab their plant-based and animal-based meat in the same section. So we heard things like, it definitely makes it easier. It's all right here. And if I'm looking for plant-based food, I only have to look in one place. Shoppers did also ask about organization by form versus brand. So it's actually easier to compare when you're looking at form versus by looking, at one brand at once. Many were surprised and delighted by the number of brands and options within the set. So introducing them to new innovation they may not have already known existed. So a lot more variety was discovered. We heard things like, I'm surprised by the number of flavors and variety of sausages and deli slices. Last but not least, some additional feedback we heard was around more awareness and placement. So consumers wanted to see where the section begins and ends to avoid mistakenly grabbing an animal-based option. So we learned that signage we currently have is not as much just an awareness play, but it's important to be used for navigation and finding the set. Comments we also heard around awareness recommendations out of store included leveraging the Kroger app, personalized coupons, recipe mailers, and circulars. So a lot of great learnings with the test, phenomenal results that we're quite excited to share out today. So appreciate the time to share out this test, and I'll pass it back to Julie to wrap up.
Thanks, Jess. That was great. Okay, so as we talked about earlier, this is just a quick wrap up. We were just amazed at how many outlets picked up. So 33 media outlets picked up the results, showing how much interest and how much the industry appreciates and is hungry for this information. So we had Forbes and Food Business News as a couple of examples, and trade publications. On the next slide, you'll see Progressive Brochure and Supermarket News, all really emphasizing how important this research is to not only to Kroger, but to the entire industry.